Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the old box office. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a preview show for the upcoming weekend of November 10th. We will talk about the two big wide openers this weekend and one limited opener. We will mention and that's kind of about it. I'll maybe bring up a couple of news articles about the box office that have been that have interested me this week. But without further ado, so the biggest opener this weekend is going to be Daddy's Home 2. This is the sequel to the comedy that came out. Was it last year or the year before? And I can't even remember. It was the year before, yeah, because it was came out right around when Force Awakens came out, like a week after, I think. Right on Christmas it opened. Kind of a surprising movie, I think. I remember when the first Daddy's Home premiered, or at least when the first trailers dropped, I sort of had the impression that it was going to be just a terrible, terrible movie. And not that I was wrong about that intuition, or my intuition was wrong there. I've seen it. I think I don't think it's a good movie. I think it's a really poorly done comedy, but it doesn't matter what I think because people loved it. It did very well opening weekend, and it had a wonderful run at the box office. So it opened at $38 million on. It looks like the Christmas weekend. Now I gotta look at the details, so I'm not making bullshit up. So the 25th through 27th that weekend opened at $38 million on almost $12,000 per theater average. Can't beat it. Fantastic. Had this really, really crazy run that only, you'll have these runs every so often, but it's usually around the holidays when you have a movie that... Sisters was another good example. Actually, I think Sisters came out right around when this did. Both Daddy's Home and Sisters were counter-programming to the juggernaut that was Force Awakens. You have a run like this where it just doesn't go away. It just week after week. Its per theater average only dipped below 2,000 in its fifth weekend, basically at the end of January, a month after it opened. So it had really sort of magical holiday legs, if you will. Critics wise, the first one was super panned. 31% Rotten Tomatoes from the critics. Audience score was not high either. This is one of those really fascinating cases, right? So critics hated it. I think the general gist of the trailer was, God, that looks stupid. Despite the fact that I think Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg are a great comedic duo, look no further than Other Guys, which I think is one of the better comedies the last 10 years. I guess it was 2010, I think. This one just seemed really not on par with that at all. It seemed very second, third tier. And what's surprising about how well it did in its legs was that the audience didn't like it that much. The audience gave it a 49%. That's not good, and that's on the Rotten Tomato audience score. I should clarify. So the audience response was not great. That might be people who have saw it later, maybe on VOD or maybe on Netflix or something like that, who have come back and rated it on Rotten Tomatoes. They don't really have historical numbers for that, so you just get the latest rating. But you cannot argue with the numbers, right? So it ended up at 150 million off of a 38 open, a 3.94, 3.95 multiplier. That's outrageously high for a movie like this. Now, yeah, the holidays really changed the multiplier game. I think Sisters had something crazy, like a 4x multiplier too. But it is kind of weird when you look at it. You take a step back and look like, well, what the audience score is super low. Critics hated it. Audiences, according to Rotten Tomatoes and a lot of reviews, also hated it. It just doesn't really add up all that much. It might have been one of those situations where, I don't know, like during Christmas and New Year's, people just want to go see movies and it's super cold. There's not much to do. So I guess people just end up in the theater, and maybe Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg got butts into the seats. With this new one, same main cast, but you got John Lithgow plays Will Ferrell's father. Mel Gibson plays Mark Wahlberg's father. So you got a whole nother layer going on, a whole nother generation of actors, a whole nother generation of people that you can bring into the theater. Like, it's going to play older now because you got these classic actors in there. Although Mel Gibson, I don't know how much of a draw he is anymore. He did Hacksaw Ridge, so everything's okay now, I think. So in any event, it's based on what you're seeing and based on what the initial reactions were to the trailer, the audience go to the last one. I don't think Daddy's Home 2 is going to do that great. I don't think it's going to open at 38. I don't see it doing $150 million. It feels like it just came out, although it was 2 years ago. Deadline is saying for Daddy's Home, they're saying about 20 million. It's going to open on 3,500 screens. So a significant drop from the original, and that's sort of the expectation right now, which I find interesting for a lot of reasons. Despite everything I just said about it kind of being an outlier, it did do really well, right? It did make $38 million. It did make $150 million total domestically. So one would question that it's just going to open to 20. And this goes back to the Bad Moms Christmas conversation that I had, I think, last week on the preview show. And I ended up being really wrong. I might be super wrong here, too, because Bad Moms Christmas very much underperformed. It performed to what people were saying, but it did not really align up with what the original did at all. So I think with this one too, the guess is here that it's going to do 20. And I think Box Office Pro had something really similar to that, about 22, I think. So they're expecting this thing to not perform very well at all. One reason may be that the reviews or the movie has been embargoed until the day of, I believe. So we have no idea what critics think of the movie before it opens. Let's see what Box Office Pro has to say here about Daddy's Home 2. Daddy's Home 2 is aiming to capitalize on the surprise success of its 2015 predecessor by adding John Lithgow and Mel Gibson into the mix with the returning Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, a duo that has proven very successful at the box office after the first film and the 2010s, The Other Guys. Twitter activity has been comparable to that of Paul Blart 2, and the repeat holiday season release could open up some potential for a modest staying power despite its status as a sequel. Pretty much everything I just said. Watch out for the legs. The legs are pretty good. But it just doesn't feel like it's going to pop off. The con they have for Daddy's Home 2, as noted and exemplified by last week's Bad Moms Christmas, comedy sequels have a recent history of declining significantly from their predecessors. As such, Daddy's Home 2 is another candidate to continue that trend. The flip side of its social media prowess is that it currently sits at about 41% behind the total fan count of Paul Blart 2 on Facebook at the comparable point before release. However, the film's biggest disadvantage may be the direct competition for families, as Thor looks to have another strong weekend. And then again, the first Daddy's Home succeeded in the shadow of a Star Wars film. All good points, I think. I think the comparison to Paul Blart 2 is pretty interesting because I think it's a similar audience for both films. I don't think it's going to do as poorly as what they're saying. Box Office Pro is looking at 22.5. Deadline saying about 20. So let's assume it does 22 and see what that gets us on the old per theater average. 3,570 is the number of theaters. That's a $6,162 per theater average. That kind of seems right. It's not opening on over 4,000, so it needs to do pretty well on that per theater average to get up there in the 20s. I don't know. I feel like that might still be too low. What happens if we pump that up to 8,000 per theater, and we'll see what that gets us. Then you're looking at 28.5. I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. The only issue is that the other big movie coming out is Murder on the Orient Express. On a lesser theaters, I think it's going to play a lot older. But the problem is that older audience, it's going to be kind of a fight between the two movies. I think Murder might be more appealing to people who are like over 50 than Daddy's Home 2. Daddy's Home 2 seems like a sweet spot would be like 25 to 50, that age range. I don't think younger people are really gonna seek that one out. So I'm gonna bump it up a bit from their projections. I'm gonna say 7,000 per theater, and that would put it at about 25. That's what I'm gonna go with. About 25 million bucks for Daddy's Home 2 is gonna be my guess. It'll slightly outperform the sort of industry projections, just because the last one did so well. I'm probably making the same mistake I did with Bad Moms 2, but we'll see. I'm sorry, Bad Moms Christmas. That's not Bad Moms 2. So I'm gonna guess 25 for Daddy's Home 2, and then I'm assuming it's gonna have decent legs again, just because of this season. At least a 3x, probably $75 million total, maybe a little bit more, maybe 3.2. I say it hits about 80 million bucks domestically for Daddy's Home 2. So that's the one big opener. The other big opener is the one I just mentioned, Murder on the Orient Express. Opening on 3,350 screens, from Fox. It's a, murder mystery on a train, Kenneth Branagh, like, he's directed it, he stars in it, Johnny Depp, Michelle Pfeiffer, Daisy Ridley, Judi Dench, Michael Pena. I thought Jeff Goldblum was in this, but maybe he's not. It's basically, catnip for people over 50 years old. Like, that's what I'm assuming is gonna, maybe like a little bit younger, maybe like over 40. I think they're gonna love this movie. Reviews, unlike Daddy's Home 2, this one was not embargoed because I think it actually is already out. In the UK, I know it's out for sure. 66% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. They do not have an audience score yet, just because it has not been released in the United States. So 65% for Murder on the Orient Express. That's about 62 reviews that are in. Not as good as I thought it would do. This has kind of a prestige, sort of higher end prestige blockbuster feel to it. Maybe kind of like, I'm trying to think of a comparable to it. Kind of feels like a little bit like Fantastic Beasts, the vibe a bit. Obviously, it's not part of the Harry Potter world or anything like that, but it just seems like, I don't know, it seems like a very almost fantasy, adventure, mystery thing going on. And it just seems like a higher quality movie overall, but 65% is not great. Just barely getting into the fresh category on Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't know. I don't know how this one's going to do either. I think it's going to be in the similar range to Daddy's Home 2. It is on, 200 less screens. So that's going to hurt it a bit. Deadline's saying upper teens to about 20. So right in the same sort of category as Daddy, a little bit below. Box Office Pro, let's see what their overview here for Murder on the Orient Express. This is under their pros category. Murder on the Orient Express hails from director and star Kenneth Branagh, whose career credentials hardly need to be explained. He and the varied ensemble cast of this remake are expected to appeal in a significant way among adult moviegoers, making this a strong bit of counter-programming in a market where Marvel's latest blockbuster is doing very well among families. Social media activity has been very positive thus far, with Facebook growth topping that of Arrival and Gone Girl, and Twitter activity on par with The Girl on the Train. Those are interesting comparables. I guess that makes sense. It's like very adult fall films. Gone Girl probably being the most popular one of that bunch. At least I think it opened at like 30 or something. Cons for Orient Express. Reviews are modest, but generally positive for Orient Express, as the film stands at 64 on Rotten Tomatoes as of this writing. That could slightly hold back the film from a bigger breakout, but overall signs for the film remain largely in favor of a strong performance. It's all relative, though. What does a strong performance really mean? They're putting it at 26 million, so they're putting it higher than Daddy's Home 2 overall. This one is perplexing. I'm not gonna lie. It's a hard guess. Let's assume it does what Box Office Pro is saying, that 26 million bucks. It's only on about 3,300 screens, so that's gonna push that per theater average up pretty high, higher than I think it's probably gonna go. They're saying $7,700 per theater. I guess that is doable. I just wish I had more information about this film and like what the ComScore does this thing called Preact. It's one of the services and data products that they offer. Basically, I think it like compiles social media data. It's kind of like a dark art tracking social media. You never know if it's really going to have that type of impact or as much as you think it's going to. You can certainly spot trends, right? But I do wonder, how this one is playing. It's going to be hard too, because social media is skewed towards younger people. People who are over 50, sure, they're on Facebook and stuff like that, but like they're not going to tweet and, Snapchat or Instagram about this. Like, that's a young man's game, as they say. And plus them, so it might be even depressed because of that, like the Preact score and the social media measuring for the excitement for this, just because there's just not the same amount of older people online interacting. So, I feel like it's going to underperform a little bit just because of the curse of Johnny Depp recently. I'm gonna say it does a very similar 7,000 per theater to Daddy's Home, and that would put it at 23.4 million. I like that. That feels really good. I think Daddy's Home is gonna beat it out. I think Murder on the Orient Express. And I should have known that it was a remake. Of course it's a remake. I think Murder is going to come in just underneath it at about $23.4 million for the weekend. Those are the two big openers coming out this weekend. Obviously, Thor is going to have a holdover, and the big thing we'll watch for Thor is what is that drop going to look like? It opened to 122. I mean, I had my show on Sunday, and I sort of guessed that the Sunday estimates were going to be low, and I was right. I think the estimate was 121. It came in at 122.7, almost 123. Really, really great performance. Super high per theater average, over $30,000 per theater. I mean, fantastic. Just, kind of broke through the top end of projections. It was projected at about 100 to 120, so say 110, and it popped in there at 123. And those projections, I think, were very positive, or sort of like really puffed it up, because obviously the last one did 85. So if you're breaking into 100, you think, oh wow, that's great. Like it's really increased on the last one. But I think I was right in saying that it felt like a different type of film, and that's why it bumped up into that 120 range. Although I was totally wrong. I was right about why it did so well, but when I predicted it, I think I said 101, because I didn't believe the hype, and I was totally wrong. The hype is there, 122, 123. So let's assume if it only does half, you're looking at 61. Obviously it's going to win the weekend again, right? Like it's no contest. It's going to come close to that. I get the feeling, and maybe I must be so biased. I must be the most biased anti-comic book movie on earth. Sometimes I feel like it. I feel like it's going to have a massive drop. It just has that aura to it. I'm going to go crazy. And I'm going to say it's going to have a 60% drop, because I'm nuts. So that would put it at 122. Well, let's do 123 to be on the nose. I think it does about $50 million. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad performance. Maybe I'm just so disconnected from the people who go see these movies that I just don't understand the massive draw towards them. And I always assume that comic book audience is eventually going to move on and have different taste, and the hype is going to fade. And I think you saw that a little bit with Ultron and Batman vs Superman and Civil War with their very, very low multipliers. But then Wonder Woman comes out this summer and blows everything out of the water and has a 4x multiplier and like changes all the rules. So is Thor going to be more like Wonder Woman, or is Thor going to be more like Captain America and do like 2.4x? Yeah, I don't know. I get the feeling it's going to drop pretty big, and it's going to freak people out. They're like, oh my god, with this. But it opened at 122. Who's complaining? They're going to print money off this. It's going to be at least $150 million profit for this movie. But I do think its legs are going to suffer here pretty quickly. And speaking of which, Justice League comes out next week. Still no social media reaction allowed. It's all been embargoed. Not a single review has popped out. That, I don't know. Some people are arguing about this online about what that means. I know that Wonder Woman stuff didn't come out to the week of, and that ended up being a pretty awesome movie, and everybody sort of agrees with that. The whole way that Justice League came about, with Snyder starting it and then having to bow out because of a sort of a family crisis. And Josh Whedon coming in there and finishing it off just doesn't. You hear that, and as someone who has followed films and film production for the last 20 years, you hear something like that and you're like, oh shit, like it's gonna be a total fucking mess. And it might be a total fucking mess. I don't know. It could be. You gotta kind of trust Josh Whedon though. Like he's kind of the master at making these movies great, right? But my guess is that Justice League is going to be a little bit messy. And Thor, I do think it's going to cut significantly into Thor's audience, though. I really do. I think there's a huge crossover there, despite the fact that like there's this sort of like bullshit rivalry between MCU people and DCEU people. It's like, come on, get over it. I think they both go and see both sides movies, so it's just kind of an empty sort of civil war. So I think Thor is going to drop pretty significantly, over 55%. And I'm going to guess about 60%, 59%. And I think it's only going to make about $50 million. Crazy bet, or sort of crazy idea that it would do that, because nothing really indicates that it will. I'm just going strictly on gut. I think it got super hyped and everyone went to see it and everybody really liked it, but I just don't see a ton of repeat for that one. And I'm probably wrong, but I got to go with my gut. Okay, so those are the new openers and the big repeater. Some limited movie opening up. 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, or Missouri if you're from there. Opening up on 4 screens. Why is this important? A lot of Oscar buzz, like a ton of Oscar buzz. Like this is one of those movies that before anybody's really seen it, it is considered like a front runner for the Academy Awards. Best film probably, and definitely best actress and best actor Woody Harrelson. I think it's almost like it's gonna happen. Like they're gonna, best writing probably too, best screenplay. And so we'll see how it does. It'll be a really interesting test to see how it plays in New York and Los Angeles, which is where I'm assuming it's opening in 4 theaters. If it really pops off and goes, well over 50K, if it goes with 70, 80K, you got a good sign that this thing's going to break out a bit, like kind of like Big Sick did. End up at Big Sick, I think opened at 84K per theater. And then last week we had a huge, massive, the biggest per theater average of the year so far. Lady Bird opened at 94K per theater. I don't think it's going to beat that. I could see it doing decently well, probably in the 60K range. I don't necessarily seeing it getting up to the big sick number, just because that movie, I don't know, that movie felt special. Like you had to see it if you're even remotely interested. This one doesn't really have that level of a must see, I think, for a lot of people. But we'll see how those people react in New York and Los Angeles to it. If it does very well, it will expand out. It kind of seems like more of a middle America picture to me, to be honest with you. I mean, it takes place in Missouri, but it has that feel to it. But it's also an art film at the same time, so you never know. It's always funny when you think about it. Like whenever there's an arty film about a part of the country that is not perhaps super into art films, like Missouri. I mean, sure, in St. Louis and maybe Columbia, they have an art show theater. In fact, I've been to the one in St. Louis. It's actually really nice. I saw The Wrestler there. It was amazing. It's just, they're not big. It's not something that people, they're not going to go see Mother or something like that, unless they accidentally went because they're J-Law fans, which so happened. I guarantee you that happened at my theater. There's like some people in that there's like a Saturday 11 a.m. screening of Mother, and there's like this like youngish girl and her mother there, and I was like, this is not a movie for you. You should go now. But what the hell was that? What exactly was my point here? It's interesting because when you have an art film that is meant for coastal and big city audiences, and it's about the South, or it's about someplace like Missouri or Middle America, it's funny sometimes how those audiences embrace those films, but when they get to an area that is similar to where the movie's actually set, those audiences like reject it wholeheartedly. We'll see if that happens with this one. My guess is that it will. I don't think it's going to play well in Missouri at all, to be honest with you. So we'll see how that does. We'll keep it on it. Anything above 50K, I think would be great for that. A really good performance, and they'll start expanding it out to different cities, and maybe it will eventually end up in Ebbing, Missouri, if that's a real place. And the other one to watch too would be Lady Bird. We'll see how that does on its second run or its second weekend. If it can keep up those numbers, like 90K per theater, I mean, that's fantastic. My gut says on that one, that is a city slicker film. Like that's just for New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, places like that. I don't think it's going to play very well at all outside those areas. It's got the Steve Jobs issue, I think. Everybody wants to see it in those big cities, but then no one else wants to see it anywhere else. Like nobody. Like there's zero audience for it in like Omaha. So despite the fact that I think it's doing so well, I don't see it breaking out that much. I see it like maybe topping out at like 10-15 million bucks total. I mean, Moonlight only made like 23 million bucks and it won Best Picture, and it was probably one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. But again, made strictly for city audiences. Did not play hardly at all outside that area of those areas. So that's the sort of the picture for this weekend. Thor is going to take number one, obviously. I think it's going to drop a lot, but it may not. Could hit 60, could hit 50. We'll see, maybe 55. I think Daddy's Home 2 will do pretty well. And I think Murder on the Orient Express will do okay. I don't see it breaking out as much as other people do. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is Movie Pass, right? So this is the service that I've talked about a lot in the podcast. Subscription. You can go to the movies as much as you want. They basically give you a debit card, and you just check in at the movie theater on your phone and say, hey, I'm going to see Thor. You check in, and it allows you to use that debit card to buy the ticket. So basically, you can go to as many movies as you want, one a day, essentially. That's the only limit. No 3D, no IMAX, nothing special like that. Really cool service. I've been using it for a long time, about three years now. It used to cost about 30-40 bucks. I think the pricing was all over the place for a long time, so you couldn't really tell if it was really worth it. Because when you're pushing like 30 bucks, like I live in Tennessee, and in Nashville, it's like not super expensive to go all the time. But that would be like, if it was $35, you're talking like, I don't know, at least you gotta get like 5 times, right? To really make it worth it. So that was a lot, but I still kept it because I like the fact that I can go whatever I want to, not really worried about paying $15 versus $8. Like, it was always just that flat subscription rate. So they kind of petered along for a few years. And then over the summer, they made a drastic, huge change and dropped the price to $10 a month. In a lot of cases, $10 a month is less than a nighttime showing of a film in any major city. Just a single ticket's like $12-13. In New York, it's like $15, $16, $17. So that changed the whole ball game for the company. I think they started to lose. They got a ton of subscribers from it. They, keep in mind, when you pay $10 a month, right? And then you go to the theater, MoviePass is paying for your movie tickets. So if you went once a day, they'd have to pay for in a month, they'd have to pay for 30 movie tickets. You're talking like at least $300 when you only pay 10. That's a loss of $290 to them. Like, how is that a business, right? Well, they sort of envisioned that. They built in the loss. A lot of people thought that, okay, it's not going to last now. I think Regal and AMC, the two biggest movie theaters in the United States, they probably thought like, this is bullshit. Like, they were super pissed when they dropped the price. They can't do anything about it though, right? Because MoviePass uses debit cards that are reloadable debit cards. So it's like they would have to just stop taking MasterCard at their theaters, which they're not going to do. So there's not a really easy way for them to shut down MoviePass. I know that they want to, especially AMC. AMC hates them. And so it was looking kind of bleak. On the one hand, MoviePass popped off. It was crazy. Like, on Reddit, everybody was talking about MoviePass. It was so weird. And I was like answering people's questions about it because everybody was super interested in it because of the price drop. I still use it. I still have my wallet. It's amazing. It's $10 for me now, and for everybody else, like, if you could get it, please do. Like, if you like going to movies, like, it pays for itself in one trip. It makes 0 sense. It makes 0 business sense. And it sounded like MoviePass was gonna like maybe kind of puff up their company and get a lot of users and then maybe sell it off to somebody, kind of a pump and dump situation. But when you listen to the CEO of MoviePass, he seemed like, no, like, this is what we thought was going to happen. We're gonna sell the user data to marketers and other companies. I was like, it's user data is worth that much when you're like losing $290 a month if someone went every day. So it just didn't really add up. People, myself included, kind of didn't know where MoviePass was going. I was super excited to see movies for basically what feels like nothing. But on the other hand, I was like, this doesn't really make a ton of business sense. So I assumed that it was going to eventually get bought pretty quickly here or go out of business, just because it didn't really, the numbers don't add up. But what just happened is a company, Helios and Matheson Analytics, which is a publicly traded company on the stock market, announced plans a couple days ago to raise $100 million to increase its investment in MoviePass. $100 million. So MoviePass is not going away, which is super surprising I think to a lot of people. They raised $100 million. I think they're going to burn through a lot of that really quickly with their current plan. But I think their goal is to build their customer base up into the millions. It's not even in the millions yet. I think it's at like 400,000, 500,000 users. They want to get that user base up into the millions, and then they have sort of bargaining power, right? They can go to AMC and Regal and say, hey, look, like, you want to shut us down constantly, but we're putting butts in your seats every single day in every part of the country. We are bringing you concessions revenues, unlike these are frequent moviegoers. Like, if you go 3 or 4 times a week, maybe you don't buy something every time, but you're going to buy something every once in a while. The profit margin on the concessions is like 90% for these movie theaters. So, I think it's honestly, Movie Pass probably should not drop it to $10 a month. Just because, or I'm sorry, it's not going to last, I don't think, is what I mean. I happily was paying $30 a month and I really enjoyed it. It was on that cusp of like, is this really worth it? Do I go that often? It's crazy. When I was paying $30, I went less. The moment it switched to 10, I was like, I gotta go all the time now. It was such a weird psychology thing that happened. But Movie Pass is not going away. They're gonna raise $100 million, it sounds like. They're backed by this company. Their stock rose 29% when they announced it. I think it's a long-term play, and it's not gonna go anytime soon. And I think eventually, what's gonna happen is AMC or Regal is gonna have to buy them for a lot of money, which is stupid, because AMC and Regal had the power. They own the theaters. They could have started their own subscription service, and they didn't. This is a really good lesson if you guys are interested in like startups and entrepreneurship. I've worked in startups for the last like 10 years now, and I've worked in about 6 different startups all over the country, and Movie Pass is a really important lesson. And the lesson is that if you are a company and you do not innovate in radical ways, there's a really great whole theory about this in entrepreneurship and business. It was an article written in the mid 90s. I can't remember the title of it. It was about basically the whole idea of disruption. It comes from this article. It was in the Harvard Business Review. And the basic underpinning of its theory of this theory in general is that big companies, well, in this case AMC and Regal, listen too much to their customers, right? And that sounds so counterproductive, or counterintuitive, I should say. Sorry, counterintuitive to what you would normally think of as a disruptive or changing your business for the better. Like, you should always be listening to your customers. But the issue with a lot of bigger companies is they're listening to their current set of customers too much, right? And they get into this sort of tunnel vision and groupthink scenarios where they're basically just always trying to better their product just a little bit more, right? And think about what's going on with movie theaters recently over the last 15 years. You have all these enhancements coming in. You have 3D. Nobody asked for 3D. I think that was obviously just a money grab. But stuff like I think that customers did ask for and are great are like reclining seats, leather seats, like that luxury seating, redoing the interiors of the theater, higher end sound, crisper sound, digital projection, better food. That's a big thing that's been going on for a long time. I think it started at like Alamo Drafthouse like 20 years ago. Well, you have a nice dinner at the movie theater. It's a whole different experience. Alcohol is big too. Growing up, they never served alcohol at a movie theater. Now it's pretty much kind of normal. So they're doing these little enhancements to the movie-going experience, because that's what they ask their customers. It's not like they're ignoring their customers. They're asking their customers what they want, and this is what they're saying. But what is the one thing they're probably ignoring about their customers, or ignoring from feedback from their customers? That's price, right? I guarantee you that's the number one complaint about going to the movies is price. And AMC and Regal have not listened to that at all, right? They're like enhancing their experience. They're making it nicer, but they haven't even thought about price, because to them that's their entire business model, right? Like, they're not going to ever lower their prices ever. And it took somebody, an outsider essentially, to say, we're going to do it for you, right? We'll buy the movie ticket for these people at a lower price, and we'll give you the difference. And it was just like, it's mind-blowing and radical at the same time. It's just like, that's insane. Why would you do that? But it might end up working, right? Because what they're doing is retraining people that a movie ticket shouldn't cost $15. People want to go to the movies all the time. I think a lot of people would go a ton if the price was significantly lower, right? And Movie Pass bet on that, and I think they're surprisingly, to a lot of people, are going to win. And they're lucky they got this $100 million, because if they didn't get this $100 million, they would be in trouble in about 6 months, I think. But they got this extra funding based on the idea. And the idea is that people want to go to the movies all the time. they don't mind paying a subscription service just as long as they can go whenever they want to, right? And nobody inside the industry, at least in America, even they probably considered stuff like that. There are places where that they do offer subscription services in movie theaters. I think the UK is one. They never really fully considered that here in the US. And now they're screwed. Essentially, now they are backed into a corner, right? Because once people get a taste of Movie Pass, and I'm telling you from someone who's used it for 3 years, you will never want to buy a movie ticket ever again. You will never ever want to spend $15 for a single movie ever, and then go spend $20 for like soda and popcorn. Like, that psychology of that, once you do Movie Pass, is over. You're like, I don't want to pay anything for this movie. I'm already paying like $10-15 a month to sort of get a pass to go. That feels right. And that's almost kind of what the experience is when you go see a movie. Because now when I go see a movie, it is very much just like, I'm part of like this, maybe not club, but like when I go see a movie, it's kind of like very casual experience. It's like my expectations are very low, and I end up really enjoying the films more, even if they're not that great. Like, I went to go see Mother, right, with Movie Pass. I went to go see Ingrid Goes West, which I never would have seen if I didn't have Movie Pass. I just showed up at the movie theaters like, I'm just gonna go to something, whatever. And I went to go see Ingrid, and it was fantastic. I went to go see Mother. I thought it was an absolute fucking train wreck, but I enjoyed myself because I didn't feel like I'd spent $20 to see something like that. So it helps, it gets people more engaged with cinema. They're going to go a ton more, spend more in concessions. They're going to have more butts in the seats. They're going to use the theaters more. To me, it's like a no-brainer. The pricing does seem to be a little outrageous. And I think they did the $10 to basically build a huge customer set, and they're going to up the price, which I'm okay with. I'm okay paying $20-30 for the service because I use it that much. I think most people do too. In any event, I wanted to bring that up and say Movie Pass is not going away. Movie Pass is not going to die. It's going to be around for at least another year now with $100 million in his pocket. And I imagine AMC or Regal will attempt to buy them very soon. And either just like smother them. And that kind of reminds me, if you guys remember, like La La, the music service, it was the first one where you had all your MP3s, right? This is like a sort of like a precursor, or it's concurrent with Spotify, but Spotify wasn't available in the United States. La La was this service where you have all your MP3s, right? And you can match them to their online library, right? So that like you could listen to your music on the cloud. Even all you had to do is match it to your library. All you had to do is prove that you had an MP3 version of it. And it was insane when it launched. It was mind-blowing. And Spotify was just getting started in Sweden at the time. But the reason I bring that up is it was a super innovative service. They saw the future. Music was all going to the cloud and no one's going to own anything anymore. They did that. They made that happen. Apple bought them and shut them down, stripped the company. Right? Like, it's fun. And then Spotify came in and took over that space, right? The thing is, you cannot stop progress. You cannot stop things from moving forward. And unfortunately, big businesses, by their very nature, are conservative, don't want to change a lot of things, don't want to make any radical changes. They get caught flat-footed. And I think Movie Pass did that to AMC and Regal. And now the Movie Pass is going to win. And the Movie Pass is going to take over Regal or AMC and like that. But AMC and Regal have to respond now, right? Regal's going to try and do their, what the hell are they going to do? Dynamic pricing on their tickets. That's going to be a disaster. I think everybody knows that. Like, it's just not going to work unless they like find finagle way of doing it right. So I think someone's going to have to buy Movie Pass and kind of put them out of their misery. And then by then, and the problem there is that, like, just like with Lala, the cat's out of the bag. Once people get a taste of it, that's what they want. And I think we'll see a subscription service from AMC and Regal within the year, not this year, but the end of 2018. And I expect one of them to buy Movie Pass. And maybe Movie Pass doesn't sell. Maybe they just say, hey, we're doing all right. Anyway, so that is the show for today. I will be back on Sunday to talk about how Daddy's Home 2 does, how Murder on the Orient Express does, and to see if Thor drops 60%. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.